Hi, this is Stephen Mead, lifelong entrepreneur, business owner, and global speaker. Over the years, I've read hundreds of books and spent thousands of hours developing what I call the Bullseye Belief System. And I've used that system to develop my own companies, as well as help others learn to be specific, targeted, and focused to get exactly what they want in life. Again, I'm Stephen Mead, and this is the Bullseye Guy Podcast. Stephen Mead again, back with another Bullseye Guy Podcast. Having fun here. Notice I might be dressed a little different. One, I learned I think I can go without the headphones, so we'll see how that works out. But I also have a hat on. Why am I wearing a hat? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. The hat is called Thanks for Your Service, but we're not going to start there. I'm going to go through, this is an entrepreneurial podcast, and it's about creating a company and a movement. We're going to go through a little arc, a little storytelling of how this particular idea came about, what we had to learn along the way, what the process has been in putting this company together, and where it is now moving forward. And again, part of it isn't to oversell what we're doing. There's a lot of things I'm going to talk about that I think are interesting from a learning perspective of creating a company, making some mistakes along the way, but also putting together some really fun and exciting things. So here we go. Let's back up. I joke a lot. Again, I like to say I joke a lot. I feel like Trump that says, do me a favor. I have to watch my crutch words, so maybe I say I joke a lot. But people used to ask me, oh, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? And that's not a fair question. I went to 13 schools through 8th grade. Now, my mom would beg to differ. She thinks she has a better memory than I do. But I went down in our basement once and counted grade cards. Little hard to argue when you pull out a box of grade cards with yourself as a kid and you find 13 of them. That would mean 13 schools through 8th grade. How do you go 13 schools through 8th grade? You pretty much move every 6 months, which is what we did. And the next logical question whenever that comes up is people go, oh, were you in the military? And the answer is definitively yes. Mom and dad were divorced at an early age, but my mom and dad were both in the military. My dad, apparently, I learned many years later through divorce, we had no communication, but I guess he won a Bronze Star and did some great things with his life, which I'm proud of. But my mom worked hard, 20 years in the military. The joke in school growing up, kids would go, oh, your mom wears combat boots, which I guess was meant to be pejorative. It was meant to be negative, and I'm like, well, yeah, she's got an M16 in the trunk. What's your point? That would shut the kids up real quick, but I wasn't joking. My mom wore combat boots and had an M16, but she also had a license plate that said Sergeant Barbie because she had blonde hair and fingernails. She was a renaissance, really, really an amazing person for what she accomplished. So I grew up somewhat around military, but not military myself. And I still have some habits that my mom gave me. My house is still clean. I make my bed every day the minute I get up, whether I'm coming back or not. So military discipline helps. What's the point? I didn't have one, but I will talk about it. A couple years ago, I think probably 2 years ago, there were some tragedies that were happening in the United States. There was this movement becoming afoot called Black Lives Matter, and there were some tragic shootings and things that happened. And again, I'm not going to pick sides because no matter in today's environment, no matter what you do, there's always somebody that disagrees with you. I could tell you right now, my favorite number is the number 3, and it is. And somebody out there is going to think I'm number shaming. This is meant to be a joke, by the way. I'm number shaming because 3 is half of the number 8. Not half like 8 divided by 2 is 4. If you cut an 8 in half, you've got a 3 and another 3. Number shaming. It's a joke. Point is, no matter what you do or say, somebody's going to disagree. So I'm not picking sides, but there was a really unfortunate thing that I am going to pick a side on. In New York, 2 police officers were assassinated. And yes, I know that's a strong word, but when a guy walks up to their car and they're sitting there and sticks a gun inside the car and shoots them, that's an assassination. No matter what you call it, no matter what side you're on, there is no excuse or reason for that. And that was a really tough thing. And again, I'm not overly on the police side of being sympathetic, not in a bad way. I love the police for what they do, but I wasn't picking sides. I was walking through Times Square, New York, right after New Year's Eve, and this had happened somewhere close to Christmas. Again, imagine that police officer, everybody has a family. And I'm walking through Times Square, and standing on the corner at Times Square is this stoic New York City police officer. And I'm going to move this around just to make sure. There's this police officer, and he's standing there, and what's he doing? Pardon my French, he's protecting dumbasses like me walking around Times Square shopping. And it struck me as odd. I thought, how weird is this? Anybody could just walk up. A couple days ago, some guy walked up and shot these cops in a car. Anybody, there's thousands of people, could walk right up to this guy and shoot him. And he's standing there in the cold protecting people like me shopping. I went, wow, how do you tell these guys thank you? Like, I really was saying, I want to tell them thank you, but I'm not the kind of that's going to walk up and say thank you. And I'm certainly not going to walk up and say, officer, can I shake your hand? You know, and those of you, again, you can't see the visuals. We're on YouTube thanks to the Groove Radio guys. Always put us on YouTube and iTunes, and the YouTube videos come in a little better because I actually have a lot of movements. I'm Italian enough to move my hands. But I don't want to walk up to a police officer and act like I'm shaking his hand, which looks like I'm drawing a gun. And excuse me. So that thought kind of resonated with me, didn't really go anywhere. And I was like, I'm not going to walk and say hi. Fast forward 2 or 3 months later, March, I believe. Again, I could look it up. I'm walking out of a breakfast meeting. Again, I was back in New York from LA. And I walk out, and as I walk out of this street, I think it's like 35th and Broadway, somewhere downtown, doesn't matter. It's in the middle of New York, 8 or 8:30 in the morning. Streets are packed as they're prone to be in New York. And to my left is an explosion. Boom. What goes through your mind? Well, what immediately goes through your mind standing on the streets of New York is terrorists attacked. But I'm programmed, again, if you've heard my podcasts and things, I'm programmed to not think negative. So while that flashed for a second, my mind immediately flipped to, well, what else could it be? Backfire. Something fell off a truck, construction, something fell off a building. It could be anything except a bomb because I didn't want to go there. But in that moment, nobody knew what it was. 30 seconds later, street starts moving. No big deal. And as I turn and I'm walking towards where that sound had come from, the street's moving, second explosion. And this time it's not just a sound, it's a fireball. And a fireball explodes out of the streets of New York. Now that's a little different situation. What happened? I watched 200 people on the streets of New York scream and start running away from the sound, including one guy. If the guy ever hears this and comes back to me, it was the funniest thing. It was tragic in that moment, but I'm watching 200 people turn and scream and run down the street, and I watch one guy, African-American, just for effect, big afro. The reason I said African-American, yeah, big afro, tall, skinny guy, and flailing his arms like the balloon out in front of a car sales. You know, you guys have all seen it, the balloon that flops around, and this guy's yelling, screaming, running down the street. But I saw 4 New York City police officers running towards the sound. Running towards the sound when they didn't know what it was. That's what really started this. Now, what it was at that time, we didn't know it, but it was an actual gas explosion. I guess it happens in New York more often than you may think. It was a gas explosion from a pipe. The pipe exploded underneath. The flame shot up through the ground, and nobody was hurt, thankfully. But in that moment, nobody knows what happened. Nobody knows what it was. And it's similar to Manchester. There was a shooting a couple years ago in Manchester, England, unfortunately, and Scooter Braun, one of the great guys from here in Los Angeles, was there, and I believe Ariana Grande was on stage, one of his talent, his clients. I'm not loose with the facts, but sometimes I remember the episodes, but not all the particular details. But the Manchester example happened, and I read a great quote from Scooter where he thanked the first responders who ran towards the sound. It's the first responders who run who you want to thank. And so that's what started. I'm like, how can I say thanks for your service? Again, apparently this was a 10-minute setup for what we're going to talk about, which is how do you say thank you to somebody if you want to say thanks for your service? And it's not just military. For me, it was police. It could be anything. And I started thinking, I want to create a universal symbol. What could I do that's a global symbol that becomes recognized worldwide that means thank you? And again, some of these things have happened. I've seen this thing when I was growing up in high school. A friend of mine who was older and had money. I didn't. We grew up very poor, but I had some interesting friends. And this particular friend of mine, I don't know how in high school, I don't even remember. He had a Corvette. And we used to cruise the streets of Kansas City. We'd go to Kansas City Plaza, which at that time let you cruise cars and park. Now they don't. But there was this secret symbol. A secret symbol. Whenever you passed another guy in a Corvette, you had this weird little wave. And then I learned through the years, Harley riders, certain guys on a motorcycle, when you go, it's just this little acknowledgement. Even now, driving down to LA, I pull my car off on the side of the road when a police is coming by, or a motorcycle, not just police, any motorcycle. And when you do that, the symbol for the motorcycle guys with their left hand, because they're going to the right side of you, they'll kind of give you a little peace sign, take their hand off for a minute or leave it on the peace sign is just them saying thank you. And it's a symbol that they acknowledge when you're there. Truck drivers, if you ever let a big truck in front of you, they flash their lights. That means thank you. So I was like, how can I create a symbol? And I started looking around and I thought, well, let's do some research. I'm a big proponent of research. And I studied the tactical symbols for SWAT. Right? The military guys, we've all seen it. Hopefully you never see it in person, but we've seen it on TV. 2 fingers this way, 2 fingers. Hey, watch this, watch your back. 5 guys are coming. There are all these hand signals that mean something. And I thought, well, let me do some research. I don't want to come up with a hand signal that means there's a kid in the trunk. And I didn't know what that might mean. Unfortunately, there's not a symbol for that, but there could have been. And so I looked at all of the SWAT signals online. It's all there. You can research it. And I went, okay, so now I've looked at SWAT. What else is there? There's the American Disabilities and Sign Language, the ADSL, right? That's basically, when you have deaf people, you've got sign language. And I thought, well, let me research sign language. I don't want to come up with something that means I want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Yeah, I'm not trying to make light of it, but I was really researching. And then underneath there, I actually went out and researched the gang symbols. I certainly didn't want to flash some gang symbol not knowing what I'm doing to the wrong person, especially a police officer. You flash a gang symbol, be like, no. So I didn't want to make mistakes. And then the last one I researched, you may not even know this was out there, but Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the terrorist organizations also have some of their own hand signals. And I didn't realize that, but I researched it. And as I did this, I was kind of trying to figure out where to go and what to end up with, and stumbled on this thing called Thanks for Your Service. That's why I'm wearing the hat. If you're wondering why I'm wearing a hat, I actually like the hat. I can see myself here, but there's 4 branches of the military. I like a lot of double entendres, and we can make the argument there's 5 with the Coast Guard, but for the most part, it's considered there's 4 branches of the military. So I was looking at the number 4 and 4 fingers and 3 fingers, and I looked at peace, which was taken, and Boy Scouts and thumbs up, and 4. I kept going back to 4. Thanks for your service. There's 4 branches of the military. There's also kind of 4 branches of civil servants. And what I mean by that is you've got police, you have fire, you have military, and you have first responders. And I put first responders out as a little different than police or fire, even though there's sometimes, underneath there. I was like, wow, a lot of double entendres with the number 4. And so I landed on this symbol, which is basically 4 fingers over your heart. It's almost like the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance, if you actually look at it, is technically your hand over your heart, which is 5 fingers, your hand is open. This particular symbol, if you're listening, is very simple. Take your thumb, fold it under. Now you have 4 fingers. If you place those 4 fingers over your heart, either singular or with a little tap, that's designed to mean thanks for your service. That was the goal, to come up with a symbol that if you see a police officer, if you see a military veteran, if you see a first responder, you can just say thank you. And some interesting things happened. again, I'm the one who came up with the idea, but it changed my perspective of even how and when I say thank you. I found myself, I still do a lot of flying. Unfortunately, I joke, I fly around the world and people go, you get to travel. I love traveling. I say, no, you love vacationing, but that's a different story. I've had great flights and I've had some pretty rough ones. And I remember landing on a rough one not too long ago. And as I'm walking off the plane, the pilot's there and I'm like, oh, thank you. And I'm telling him thank you, but I find myself putting the four fingers over the heart. And I actually thought, well, that's interesting, as I found myself saying thank you and doing a symbol. And I did some research on pilots, and it was really interesting. The pilot a lot of times will stand there at the door, and as you're leaving, thank you. Most people don't say thank you to the pilot who just saved your life and landed safely. And they love it when you do. I found myself saying thank you to a guy who was walking out of a Starbucks, and there's a guy with a leaf blower blowing leaves everywhere. And he actually stopped, let me walk through the parking lot and get my car before I started the car to leave. And I found myself saying thank you. So it was really interesting. The mindset of what it had was I started saying thank you more often. And so where we started is, how do you say thanks for your service? And that's what we ended up with. Great logo. And what I did onto the entrepreneurial side, that's the premise of thanks for your service in the hat. Then I'm like, all right, now we need a logo. So I went to Fiverr. Here's one of my entrepreneurial hacks. There's a great site called Fiverr. Fiverr stands for $5. Now you might pay $15 or $20, but there are graphics people who will build you a logo for $5. Professional is expensive, but an amateur costs a fortune. But in this circumstance, I actually had 4 people. I was willing to spend $20 to see if anybody came up with a good logo. One of the logos was creepy, and I keep a lot of this because it becomes a good case story. It was these weird, creepy, craggly fingers. It looked more like something from Halloween. And another one was a hand around a heart, and I'm like, that one looked weird. But we kind of ended up with something that was cool with 4 fingers over the heart, and then we ended up with, where do the words go? And what do you end up with color-wise? And this became the entrepreneurial endeavor of how do you start a company and what do you want it to do? And thanks for your service, to me, has ended up really cool. We are not a nonprofit. I bristle at the word nonprofit. And some people get mad at me when I say that, and that's okay. I don't care, because what I learned about most nonprofits is they don't actually do anything. Want to be controversial? Tell somebody a nonprofit, you don't do anything. But what I mean by that is most nonprofits are out there about raising awareness. And I built a slide. Years ago, we tried to do something in the eco space. And my slide was, awareness builds apathy. Actions bring achievements. I don't need an awareness campaign. Give me an action. If it's something I can do, something I can volunteer, something like a symbol where I can help move that momentum forward or that movement. Actions bring achievements. And so when we looked at this, we said, hey, let's come up with a way to not just do thanks for your service, but how can we extend this mission and extend the momentum? And we ended up looking at a couple different things. What I unfortunately, again, air quotes, I unfortunately call this the 3 Fs. Fs is in Frank's, but the Fs sadly stand for something different. The Fs stand for funerals, foundations, and fundraisers. I like building companies that help other people be successful. I like building things that are a platform. And thanks for your service has become a platform for other circumstances. What I mean by that is if there's a police officer and they unfortunately get killed, and it happens way too often, almost invariably there's a fundraiser for that police officer, that fallen officer, police, fire. There's a fundraiser. Sometimes there's a foundation that's set up. And then unfortunately there's a funeral. And the funerals are all kind of tied together. So what we did is we said, let's come up with a line to help these other people in these sad circumstances. And so we said, let's come up with a line of hats that are blue for Blue Lives Matter. Let's come up with a line that's red, and let's come up with camo for military. And so that's what we did. And we ended up looking at different colors and different schemes. And the entrepreneurial side is, everybody will get the colors right. well, we're going to switch gears, switch hats. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a little hat switch here. As I switch to my blue hat, our first version hat was the white one I had on. Actually, the first thing we did was a lapel pin. If you've been watching, I almost always wear this little lapel pin. Thanks for your service. And people ask me about it. What is it? I go, thanks for your service. And I tap, and people love that because it's simple. But our blue hats were designed for police, with the idea being you could buy a blue hat that just says thanks for your service. And we set it up to sell it at cost. Again, I'm not trying to over promote it. This is the entrepreneurial side of where we arrived and derived the message is you can buy a hat at basically wholesale cost for us. And then that foundation funeral fundraiser marks it up. They can sell it at whatever they want, 25, 30, 40. The foundation, the fundraiser, the funeral sets the price and they get to make all the money. This isn't about me trying to run a fundraiser and I don't want to raise money. I want to help other people in unfortunate circumstances be more efficient. What's the hat though? If you see this hat on YouTube and the color looks kind of funny, that's because it is. They got the color wrong. The good news with this hat, I'm actually going to take this off. I've never done this before. I feel like I'm in an infomercial with products. So here's the white hat. If you look across the brim and the bill, I'm putting this really close to the camera for anybody watching on YouTube. Hopefully we're on the right camera, camera one. The second version came out and I like it a lot better. It has what's called a flag sandwich. Hopefully you can see it within there. There's the American flag in the bill. On the back is the American flag. So we like this version of the hat a lot better, but the color is off. So we learned that you can't just tell somebody police blue. You can't just say blue. You have to be specific. When you're doing colors, there's a cool thing called Pantone or PMS. I think it's PMS. If it's not, I apologize to the women who think I make it. I believe it's PMS and Pantone, but there's specific colors by number that printers know. If you're going to do a logo and you want it to be a specific color, research. Find the Pantone color so when you give it to people, the colors come across the right way. And I learned that in designing my own shirts. I think this is a segue. I've had a tailor in Korea for years. I love designing my own shirts, and I design them to match my watches. It's kind of funny, but I used to send off 7 or 8 or 9 shirts to the guys in Korea, and they'd get 7 of the 8 or 9 right, and invariably they'd get 1 or 2 wrong. One of my orders, I did this beautiful kind of aqua green. It was really a cool green. It came back teal. I don't know if you know the color teal. I can't wear teal. It was so hideous. I'm like, okay, 7, 8 out of 10. Did another order, and one I did this deep kind of purple and a little bit. It came back Barney purple. Barney. Couldn't figure out why. Then I realized the Koreans' monitors were 10 years older than the monitor I was on. So I send it to them, and on my monitor, the purple looks great. On theirs, they're almost in a green CRT. They're guessing at what the color is. If you build a logo, if you build a product, don't make people guess. Do the work. Come up with the right color. And so that's what we did. We ended up with a line of hats and t-shirts and polo shirts. Again, from the entrepreneurial standpoint, though, we were trying to figure out, what do we do? What's our message? How do we become a fundraiser? Do we sell the hats? Do we mark them up? Do we set a retail price? Again, I have a great guy named Mark Firestone who worked with me. Fascinating story with Mark. He was running licensing for Rolling Stones. His dad helped launch the Pet Rock with Gary Dahl in 1975. Anybody still knows the Pet Rock? The Pet Rock was only in market for 90 days. At that time, there were only 2 gift shows twice a year. There was one in LA and one in somewhere else. The Rock was only on the market for 1.5 years. It's one of the greatest selling products of all time in 18 months. Really fascinating. But Mark was like, oh, let's do retail pricing. And that was when we had a little bit of, not a conflict, but a discussion, and said, no, let's not set a price on the product. Because if you unfortunately have a funeral and you want to set a price for a hat of $50 or $90 or $100 and the proceeds go to that person, I wanted to be a platform for the individual organizations to make the decision. So then we said, all right, what else can we do? And now the hats can be customized across the top. It can have, NYPD, NYFD. If it's a fallen officer, it could have a badge on the side. Even if it's not, it could just be NYPD with the badge. Again, hats, T-shirts, logos, blue, red, camo. But we had to learn along the way. The entrepreneurial side was, what's the inspiration of the idea? How do you create and build a logo? How do you create your messaging? And what do you want your company to do? What do you want it to stand for? What do you want to do to be able to help other people? And that's what Thanks for Your Service was about. Now, like I said, whenever I go out, some of these stories I can't get through without crying because there's some emotional ones. I remember walking on a plane, and I carry around, any of you guys that see me now, I carry around a bunch of the lapel pins. I have some in my pocket here somewhere because I like giving them out. They're a great little tool. I gave one to a veteran. And how do I know he's a veteran? Well, one, he was about 90 years old. And two, he was proudly wearing a hat. The veterans who were in some of these wars that fought for our freedom are so proud for what they did, and they rightly should be. They fought for the freedom to allow us to live the lives that we have now. Unlike some of these other countries, we live in the greatest society with the most freedoms. And the veterans proudly wear their hats. If you see them, tell them thank you. But I gave him a little pen. I said, do you mind if I give you something? He's like, absolutely not. Gave it to him. He's like, what's this? And I told him, I was like, here's what it is. And thanks for your service. And again, I don't think I can get through it without crying. The guy starts crying. I can't get through it without crying. The guy starts crying in the middle of the plane because nobody tells him thank you. So I don't think I can get through it. It's powerful. Here, let me switch gears. Let's go to New York, right? The veterans kill me. Same thing in New York. I'm in a hurry. I'm running in New York. New York's where the whole idea started, and I'm coming out and about to run down a subway and looking, and I know I can catch the next train. And standing there are two police officers just standing talking, and I'm halfway down the stairs, and I'm like, you know what? There'll be another train in 7 minutes. Let me go back up. So I go back up, and I ask the guys, like, politely, I'm like, hey, excuse me, can I interrupt you guys? Can I talk to you for a second? They're like, yeah. I'm like, let me give you something. And I said, I'm going to reach in my pocket. It's, I have to warn these guys because I don't want them to be scared. And I pull out the pen and give it to them. They're like, what's this? And I'm explaining it to them. They're like, oh my God, thank you so much. This is amazing. People don't tell us thank you. And I said, why do you think that is? And not only did they tell me this, there was another time in Times Square, I have pictures of it. The same story keeps coming back. The officer said, well, we don't know, but if we were to guess, it's because people are afraid to talk to us. And I was like, wow, how fascinating that we're afraid. And I can understand that. I mean, I don't get stopped that often, but even when I'm driving and see a police officer in a car, I'm still worried. Is he going to stop me? Am I doing anything wrong? But just the fact that these guys are there and people are afraid to say thank you or afraid to talk to them was really moving to me. And so that was the whole idea, is how can we create a movement? All right. So as much as this may have been about promoting Thanks for Service, it's not. I wanted this to be the entrepreneurial side of what's your passion? What's your motivation? What's your impact when you build a company? What are you trying to do? And how does it move the needle to help other people? Don't just raise awareness, create an action. Create something that people can do that makes a difference. Go out, create companies, make a difference. But at a minimum, when you see somebody and want to say thank you, tell them thank you. And if you really want to do it the right way, give them thanks for your service, little 4-finger tap over your heart. Let's create a movement. Let's change the world. Let's help people feel better every single day. Again, Steve Amede, the Bullseye Guy, thank you for tuning in. I've got my closing sheet here again in case I don't forget anything. Let's see. For more information, contact me, thebullseyeguy.com. Groove Radio. Hey, I hope you guys like the new background. Right? Eagle's sitting next to me. The background's cool. Again, these are all covers from the albums of when Eagle used to spin as a DJ. So amazing stuff back there. One day I may do some close-ups and stories on it. But again, Steve Amede, thebullseyeguy.com. Thank you. Tune in next week.